Yo, yo, yo. Week 8 is done in the books. Man, for a week that was marketed as a down week in college football, was proven to have a lot of good games, a lot of interesting games this week. I mean, in my opinion, there's no down weeks in college football because any given week, anything can happen. Yeah, we had some great games this week. Also, shout out to the Braves for making the World Series. That's huge. That game just went off a little while ago. Let's go Braves. First World Series appearance since 1999. Let's go. All right, let's check in on some of these games. Top 25 tier list, performance tier list. We're checking in to see how these teams in the top 25 performed this week, not including teams that were on a bye week. We'll see their performance, how they did. So let's get into it. Starting on Wednesday night. Number 14, Coastal Carolina at App State. Coastal Carolina was the 14th ranked team. They were undefeated, and I don't know why teams schedule these middle of the week games, especially ranked and you're on the road. It just crazy things happen. It never works out. Most of the time never works out. So App State ends up handing Coastal Carolina their first loss, 30-27. Coastal Carolina is a good team. They have a crazy good offense. Super unique. App State pulls the win off by 3. This loss doesn't make Coastal Carolina any worse than they were. Doesn't make them a bad team. People might point to Coastal Carolina and say, see, I told you they were overrated or they're no good and this, that, and the other. Coastal Carolina is a good team. App State, they took advantage of their matchups. They took advantage of their opportunities, and they got to win. So shout out to App State. Good team. I think Coastal Carolina takes the L. I wouldn't say they shit the bed. It was a 3-point game. Wednesday night game on the road. Yeah, they don't qualify for shit the bed. They just took the L. Okay, so Thursday night. Number 21, SMU hosted Tulane. And SMU still undefeated. Tulane, this is their 6th loss. They only have 1 win. SMU wins 55-26. Game wasn't in question. If you look, SMU scored 17 in the first quarter, 14 in the second quarter. 17 in the fourth. They never let their foot off the gas. Tulane just overmatched in this game. So SMU, I think that's a good win for them. I think it's a good win. It was a middle of the week game, and they handled business where, as we see in the game before that happened the night before, crazy things happen to ranked teams during the week. All right, so our highest ranked team that played Saturday, number 2, Cincinnati at Navy. This was a dogfight the whole way. Cincinnati travels to Navy. Navy only has 1 win this season, but they're one of those teams that they run one of those offenses, triple option, where you have to prepare specifically for Navy, and you probably won't play another team the rest of the way that has the same type of offense. So a super unique game plan and going into that game. And those offenses are kind of known for causing some scares in games that talent-wise they shouldn't be in at all. So Cincinnati gets to win 27-20. Navy scored late to make the score 27-20. And then they recovered an onside kick with like 26 seconds left in the game to give them a chance to win or to tie at least. Yeah, so Cincinnati really took a scare this game. Navy put up 10 in the fourth quarter while Cincinnati was held scoreless. Cincinnati survives Navy. They got the win though. Really all that matters at the end of the day. So they're still in a good spot. All right, number 3, Oklahoma at Kansas. This was a noon game. It's a crazy game. Kansas was winning 10-0 at halftime. Kansas just jumped on them early. Oklahoma looked like they weren't even ready for this game early. They did come alive in the second half. They played like people expected them to in the second half. Third quarter, Oklahoma scored 14 points. In the fourth quarter, they scored 21. They ended up winning 35-23. Now, this was a one-score game late in the fourth, about midway through the fourth. Oklahoma didn't play a half of football and still beat Kansas. So, we know what Kansas is. They have 1 win against a terrible team. This was the first game they had a lead on a Big 12 team all season. Oklahoma did not look good this game. For that reason, Oklahoma survives Kansas, which is embarrassing in itself. But they didn't lose. We've seen teams lose close games like that this year against teams they really shouldn't even be anywhere close to. So shout out to Oklahoma for actually getting the win. Not a good win at all. And if you have hopes for going further, Big 12 championship, possibly playoffs, you can't play a half of football. You see, even against a team like Kansas, they can take advantage of that. So Oklahoma gets the win. It didn't set them back any. They're moving forward. We'll see if they learn from it. All right, Tennessee at Alabama. Alabama is ranked number 4. They're 7-1 on the season, and they take care of business 52-24. This was a weird game because Tennessee was very competitive in this game up until the fourth quarter. During the fourth quarter, that's when Alabama really ran the score up. As you can see, Alabama scored 28 in the fourth quarter. It's pretty insane. But that lets you know how close this game was. Through 3 quarters, Tennessee was seriously playing with Alabama toe for toe. I mean, if you just look at the final score, I mean, it looks like they destroyed them. That being said, I think it's a decent win. Tennessee's not great. They have a good offense as of recently. Final score aside, this was a competitive game for most of the game. Ohio State at Indiana. Ohio State's ranked number 5 going into Indiana. A team that had high hopes going into the season. A lot of praise in the offseason. Hasn't performed to that level or near that level. They are 2-5 on the season. Not good at all. 0-4 in the Big Ten. What are you doing? So Ohio State wins 54-7. Absolutely slaughtered them. Drugged them up and down the field the whole game. Indiana scored a touchdown the first quarter and didn't score again the rest of the game. Ohio State did whatever they wanted. So because the score was 54-7 against Indiana, I feel good about giving them a dominant win. Shout out to Ohio State. Northwestern at Michigan. Michigan's ranked number 6. They're undefeated on the season, and they win 33-7. Very similar to the game before, Ohio State, Indiana. They did whatever they wanted against Northwestern. 33-7. Not a close game by any stretch of the imagination. I feel like it's only right to also give Michigan a dominant win. So I know these two teams love being next to each other like that. So yeah, Ohio State, Michigan, both get dominant wins this week. They got a game coming up pretty soon, so they'll get to work out who's really better. A lot of good games in the Big Ten coming up. A lot of big games. Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan, they're all about to start playing each other starting next week. It's going to get pretty wild. All right, so Illinois at Penn State. Penn State's ranked number 7. I have a feeling they won't be number 7 for too long. They lose to Illinois 20-18. This game went into 9 overtimes. And these overtime rules are crazy this year. After the second overtime, first 2 overtimes are like they were previous years, where you get the ball on like the 25 or 30. You score a touchdown or a field goal, the other team gets a chance to match. This year, after the second overtime, it's basically you're going for 2 every time. So you get a 2-point conversion. The other team comes out, gets a play. If they get it, we'll go into another overtime. You come out, you miss the 2-point conversion. Other team comes out, they miss it. You move on to the next overtime. They got to 9 overtimes for Illinois actually scored without Penn State scoring. 9 overtimes. That's pretty insane. So Penn State loses 20-18. Very low scoring game. Very defensive heavy game. Man, they lost to Illinois, man. That is not a good look. Only scored 18. I know they're bringing back their quarterback, their starter, into this game. It was his first game back. But Penn State shit the bed, man. 20-18 against Illinois. They have a chance to bounce back. They have a chance. That is their second loss. Unfortunately, the second loss sold so much weight. But they still have a lot of good games coming up. So just because they have their second loss, don't count out Penn State to still have a lot of good football left in them. Number 8, Oklahoma State at Iowa State. Iowa State is now 5-2. Oklahoma State was undefeated going into this game, and Iowa State wins 24-21. So Iowa State is a team that I feel like is better than their record indicates. In their 2 other losses, they had horrible turnover margin. They were in the minus in turnovers. If you're playing a good team and you're in the minus in turnovers, it's tough to win like that. So Iowa State gets to win over Oklahoma State, handing them their first loss. But that being said, Iowa State is a good team. 3-point game. Oklahoma State takes the L. Their first loss. Not the end of their season by any means. No room, no margin for error. Maybe it's a wake-up call if you want to try to look at it on the good side. Look for a positive. I don't know. Number 10, Oregon at UCLA. I believe this was the game day game this week. Oregon wins 34-31. Oregon and UCLA were just trading points this game. But Oregon dug down and found a way to win. So they move on to 6-1. UCLA gets their 3rd loss of the season. A lot of people were picking UCLA to win this game. Judging by the final score, they were not too far off from getting that right. So Oregon moves on 6-1, 34-31 over UCLA, which is a decent team. They've taken some bad losses, but they're still a decent team. Oregon gets a good win. LSU at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is the 12th ranked team. They have 1 loss on the season. LSU is probably one of the strangest teams in the country. They basically have a dead man walking as their head coach. He's already fired. He's agreed to stay on until the end of the season. So you look at this game and you're thinking, how do the players respond to playing for Ed Orgeron? Do they kind of give up? Do they try to play harder for him? Do they feel like it's a lost cause at this point? And LSU beat Florida last week. LSU has lost some horrible games. I don't know, they're a very strange team. So I really didn't know what LSU team you were going to get this week. Coming off the news that Edo was going to be fired at the end of the season. Or already fired. But Ole Miss handles their business 31-17. They move on to 6-1. Their 1 loss coming to Alabama. So the SEC West title is still, that hope is still alive for Ole Miss. Ole Miss, Alabama, and Auburn all have 1 SEC loss. The problem for Ole Miss is their 1 loss is to Alabama, so they have the tiebreaker over them. But if Alabama drops another game, Ole Miss wins out. Ole Miss will be going to Atlanta. Same thing for Auburn. They have to play Alabama at the end of the season. Auburn runs the table, beats Alabama. They have the tiebreaker over them. Or Alabama would have 2 SEC losses at that point, and they would go to Atlanta. Problem is, Ole Miss and Auburn play each other, I think, next week. And also, Alabama has been looking pretty good recently. So, still a lot of unknowns in the West. It'll all play itself out as these teams start playing each other. So, we'll see. Something to keep an eye on, though. So, Ole Miss over LSU. I think that is a decent win. And that's not a knock on Ole Miss. I just think LSU is kind of a shell of their selves right now. Just fired their coach, but he's still coaching there until the end of the season. Just a weird scenario. So I give Ole Miss credit for a decent win. USC at Notre Dame. Notre Dame is the 13th ranked team, and USC is unranked. Notre Dame wins 31-16. This was kind of a temperature shock for these South California kids going up to Notre Dame, to South Bend, playing in some cold weather, something they're not really used to. I don't know how much of a factor that was. That was a talking point going into this week. So Notre Dame wins 31-16. This was predicted to be a very close game. Notre Dame gets the win, moves on to 6-1 overall. USC falls to 3-4. USC is a decent team. They're not great. They're decent. They fired their coach in week 2. So Notre Dame, where you at, Notre Dame? There you are. I think that's a good win. Shout out to Notre Dame. Wake Forest at Army in one of the weirdest games this week, 70-56. Ton of scoring in this game. Wake Forest wins 70-56. Wake Forest still undefeated. Last remaining ACC undefeated team. So they beat Army, which is 4-3 now. Just an insane game. Look at these numbers for Wake Forest. 14 points in the first and second quarter. And then in the second half, 21 points in both quarters. That is an insane number. 70 points? Most games don't combine for that much. So Army, decent team. I didn't expect it to be anything close to this of a high-scoring game. Army's not great, though. So let's see, where would Wake Forest go? I think Wake Forest would fall into decent win. Shout out to Army, but I wouldn't consider them beating them a good win or a dominant win for Wake Forest. But they got the win. Crazy high-scoring game. Shout out to Wake Forest. South Carolina at Texas A&M. Texas A&M number 17 in the country. They win 44-14. They're 6-2 on the season. South Carolina falls to even at 4-4. Something weird about these two teams is they play each other every year. They're the cross-division game every year. South Carolina hasn't beaten Texas A&M since A&M joined the SEC. It's kind of insane. South Carolina has had some really good teams, and Texas A&M, while South Carolina had really good teams, Texas A&M had decent teams. Nothing crazy. So that's just a really weird stat between these two teams. So A&M gets to win 44-14. Not a close game at all. South Carolina didn't even score until the fourth, till the game was basically over. Texas A&M, I'm giving you a good win. I just think you handled South Carolina like you were supposed to, and you didn't play with them. Didn't play around. Number 18, NC State at Miami. Miami wins 31-30. 1 point game. NC State, man, what are you doing? Drop the game to Miami? Shout out to Miami for getting the win. NC State now has 2 losses on the season. Miami moves to 3-4. Miami has been a disaster lately. There's serious talks of fans wanting Manny Diaz fired this season, but they put it together in this game. Beat NC State. NC State, I'm sorry, but losing to Miami this year, you get to shit the bed, man. Was a 1 point game. Maybe there's a case for took the L instead. I just think that's a shit. I think they shit the bed. San Diego State at Air Force. A lot of academy schools playing top 25 teams this week. San Diego State gets to win 20-14 against Air Force. San Diego State still undefeated, 3-0 in the Mountain West. This was a close game. A touchdown, an extra point for Air Force would have won the game, and San Diego State didn't even score in the fourth, while Air Force did get a touchdown. So this was a kind of a scare for San Diego State against Air Force. They are conference opponents, and Air Force looks like a good team this year. They're 6-2. This was their second loss. I'm going to give San Diego State a decent win. Decent/okay win. Clemson at Pittsburgh. Oh, Clemson, how the mighty have fallen. So Pittsburgh is the number 23 team. They're at home against Clemson. They get to win 27-17. 10-point game. Wow. And this was huge for Pitt. I mean, in years past, they're used to penciling in an L against Clemson every season. So this was a huge statement win for them. Clemson is down this season, but it's still the same Clemson. It's been beaten up on the entire ACC the past 5-6 years, maybe 7 years. Huge win for Pitt. They move on to 6-1. So Pitt, that's a good win. That's a really good win for Pitt. Shout out Pitt. The UTSA Roadrunners, number 24 in the country. This may be their first time they've ever been ranked in the top 25. I'm not totally sure, but they're undefeated this year, 8-0, after beating Louisiana Tech 45-16 on the road at Louisiana Tech, and they went 45-16. These are conference opponents. Louisiana Tech is now at 2-5. The Roadrunners, man, that is awesome. Sickest mascot in the game. So 45-16. I'm giving the Roadrunners a good win. Shout out to the Roadrunners, man. I love that. All right, Wisconsin at Purdue. Purdue is the 25th ranked team in the nation, and they lose at home against Wisconsin 30-13. Wisconsin is one of those teams that might be a little better than their record indicates. Still a decent team. They're almost known for not even having an offense. Very heavily defensive-minded team, and they put up 30 against Purdue while still holding them to 13. Purdue. It hurts me to do this. Shit the bed. Got blown out at home against Wisconsin. Sorry, Purdue. We hardly knew you. So there you have it. There's your top 25 performance tier list for this week. There wasn't a single ranked versus ranked matchup this week, but if you aren't a casual, there was a lot of intriguing matchups this week, and even games that you thought might not be interesting. They turned out to be some pretty good games. There was a few teams on bye weeks this week. Next week is loaded. So there you have it. There's your teams in the top 25 for week 8, how they performed, and yeah, later.